Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Lambda Test XP series. Through XP series, we dive into a world of insights and innovation featuring renowned industry experts and business leaders in the testing and QA ecosystem. I'm your host, Harshit Paul, Director of Product Marketing here at Lambda Test, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. In today's session, we will explore how you can transition from manual to automated testing using Cypress. So if you're looking your ways to enhance testing efficiency, improve coverage, or accelerate time to market, then you're in the right place. Let me introduce you to our esteemed guest on the show, Anna Patterson. Anna is a Cypress ambassador and a seasoned QA expert with over a decade of experience. She has worked with companies like IBM, Nationwide Insurance, Applause, and is currently leading QA at EVERFI as the principal software quality engineer. With her background in teaching, she has a unique ability to break down complex technical topics into digestible insights, helping teams and individuals embrace test automation with confidence. And today, Anna will help us understand how we can unlock efficiency, transitioning from manual to test automation using Cypress. And let's jump straight into the heart of today's discussion. But before we do, Anna, how about you let our audience know a little bit about yourself and your journey in QA?
Hi, Harshit. Thank you for having me on this webinar today. It's a pleasure to be here with you and talk about test automation topics. Thank you for the introduction as well. Said a lot of good things about me. As you said, I'm currently a principal software quality engineer at EVERFI, and I have about 10 years of experience, actually over 10 years now, of experience in quality assurance. And I'm also an ambassador for both Cypress and Applitools. And I've had the opportunity to lead testing efforts across industries ranging from education to enterprise solutions. My work focuses on leveraging modern automation tools to ensure product quality while accelerating release cycles. Today, I'll be sharing some practical insights on making the leap from manual testing to automation, focusing on how Cypress can be a game changer for your testing strategy.
Thank you so much for that. And let's get this started. And when we speak of Cypress, a lot of people think of it as an open source offering upfront, right? So it poses a question on the security aspect of things. How can organizations ensure the security of open source tools like Cypress in their testing infrastructure? What are some best practices that you would suggest?
That is a great question, since security is a crucial consideration when incorporating any open source tool into a testing infrastructure. There are some ways that you can ensure security while using an open source tool like Cypress or any other open source tool. So first of all, keep it updated. So regularly update Cypress to the latest stable version to benefit from security patches and bug fixes. Another tip is to use dependency scanners. Tools like Snyk, GitHub Dependabot, they can help identify and mitigate vulnerabilities in Cypress and its dependencies. Another thing you can do to enforce security is to enforce secure test data handling. So if possible, avoid storing sensitive data such as API keys and credentials in test scripts and configuration files. Instead, try to use environment variables or secret management solutions. Another way to enforce security would be to implement access controls to ensure that only authorized users have access to test code and results, following the principle of least privilege. And you can also monitor network traffic. Since Cypress runs in the browser, monitoring network requests and restricting unnecessary external calls can prevent data leaks. So by following these best practices, you can leverage Cypress securely while maintaining the integrity of your testing infrastructure.
That makes a lot of sense. And I believe like every big organization has this as one of the biggest challenge, which is data leaks, right? They're so hard to prevent. But of course, you have to be cautious. Better to be, preventive than to be sorry later on. So thanks for sharing those insights. And with that said, how does EVERFI implement data-driven testing using Cypress? Do you face any challenges? How were they resolved if you come across any?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So at EVERFI, there were a couple of ways, and there are a couple of ways that we use to implement data-driven testing, if you want to call it so. So we use fixtures and external data files. You can store test data in JSON files and dynamically inject it into tests or utilize it in your tests, allowing for scalable and reusable test scenarios. We also create reusable Cypress commands to fetch and manipulate test data, which ensures consistency across tests. And we also use integration with APIs. So instead of relying solely on UI interactions, we leverage API calls to seed and verify test data, making tests more efficient and reliable. So this way, we create new test data every time we run our tests. And then at the end of the test, we delete that data. Which leads us to one of the challenges that is typically faced when you are creating a lot of test data on the fly is how do you manage it, right? So how do you manage all of the data that's being created and potentially just left in the environment to hang around, right? So that's where it's important to have a good test data management strategy, which includes deletion of the data once the test is complete. So in our case, for the tests that create new test data on the fly, we use a delete API call in the after hook for that test to make sure we clean up that test data after the test is finished. And another layer of test data deletion is we run a regular scheduled job that tries to clean up any data that was not deleted in that API call for whatever reason. You know, sometimes it could be the network was down or another reason that could cause the data to not be cleaned up immediately after the test. So that extra layer allows us to clean up any orphan data that was left over. There's some other things you can do. You can do database cleanup, for example. So it really depends on your infrastructure and architecture of your application, and you can determine the best method to deal with that. Another thing that which faced as a challenge as far as data management is that managing test data for different environments is complex. The way we solved it in our organization is by implementing environment-specific fixture files and configuration settings. So let's say if your data is different across different configurations, you can use environment-specific configuration files, and that way, when you run Cypress, you can pass your configuration file to that particular environment as a command line argument. That way, you will use the correct data for that particular environment. Another challenge that we faced was handling dynamic data. So if you are generating new data on the fly, you need to make sure that you utilize some dynamic values. For example, you can add timestamps or unique IDs to the records you are creating. So that way you don't create just the same, or, depending on your setup, you might not be even allowed to, let's say, create a user, of course, with like repeated usernames, since that's supposed to be unique to that user, or for example, the user ID, right? So to handle that, we introduced custom commands, custom utilities to handle these cases and generate unique IDs. You can also use, there are some tools and plugins you can use to generate unique IDs. So that way you don't have to write your own custom command. So there are a couple of different ways you can handle it to make sure that the data you're generating has unique IDs, unique usernames, and timestamps, for example. And another issue that you could face, and we actually faced in our test data-driven execution, is potential slowing down of the test suite. If you are creating test data every time you run that test, that adds on execution time to your test. So to deal with that, as I already mentioned, first of all, we try to create the data via APIs. And depending on your application infrastructure, you could be able to directly seed your test data in to the database instead of going through the UI, because going through the UI is much slower, and it's also more prone to failures and flakiness in case something in the UI is not displaying properly, or if the UI takes longer to load. So one way, as I said, to address that is using APIs. And another one is to make sure that you utilize parallel execution. Cypress has built-in parallelization features that you can use, and you can utilize Cypress Cloud for that. That way, when your tests are running in parallel, it takes much faster to execute them. So these strategies have helped EVERFI scale automated testing efficiently with Cypress.
Wow, that was a lot of insights right there in that question. So that goes to show how much you had your hands dirty when it comes to Cypress, right? You talked about so many challenges there, and I'm sure a lot of our audience would be able to relate to pretty much all of it, right? Depending on different aspects. But of course, as we speak of challenges, there are bugs involved as well, and to fix them, we need to debug, right? So how do you share some effective, like what are your thoughts on some more effective methods that you would recommend for debugging using Cypress tests?
Great question. Debugging is definitely something that every test automation engineer has to face in their daily life when tests fail. I would say that debugging Cypress tests efficiently requires a combination of built-in Cypress features and best practices. So one thing that you can use is commands like scilog and scidebug, as these commands help track test execution and pinpoint failures. So that way you can dig deeper and pause on a certain step, or log the output of a certain command to help you understand where exactly it's failing and where it's going wrong. Another thing is, of course, Cypress Test Runner. The UI of Cypress Test Runner is very intuitive and useful, and it has this great feature called time traveling. So the time traveling debugger lets you inspect snapshots of the test at each step, before and after, making it easier to identify issues. Another thing is console logs and network requests. You can use site-intercept to capture API requests and responses, and check the browser's DevTools console for errors. And you can see all of the request properties and response properties to help you understand where it's not working as expected. You
Got
can
it.
also use headless and headed mode for Cypress. As I mentioned, if you want to use the Cypress's interactive debugging and time traveling, you can use Cypress open command to run tests in headed mode. And then you can use headless mode to catch issues in CI environments. So, for example, if you have a situation where the issue is only reproducible in CI, and you want to run it in headless mode on your local machine to see if you can reproduce this issue in the same environment in the same manner, you can use the headless mode. But also, Cypress has a great dashboard in the Cypress Cloud, where you can use the feature called Test Replay It records a video for you. It records all of the network activity. So you can see the test running pretty much the same way as if you were running it on your machine in the Cypress runner. So you can see all of the network activity. You can inspect the network activity. You can inspect the DOM, and then you can watch the video and like pause it, go back and forth between different parts of the video to see better exactly where it's failing and what happened before it failed and after it failed.
Got it.
And then also just video and screenshot recording as well, just, some artifacts that Cypress automatically records as well. So, yeah. So there's
Understood.
some techniques.
Wow. So does Cypress do that by default, the recording of every test? So, or do folks need to turn on a capability or setting to see those videos on cloud?
So as far as cloud goes, first of all, it's important to keep in mind that's once you cross a certain threshold or the free tier of Cypress, how many runs you are allowed to record for free, then you will have to move on to the paid tier. So all those great features might become unavailable if you are not at the paid tier. And I think that's one of the main gripes people have, is that, especially for parallel testing, is that there's not that many runs you're allowed to do for free with Cypress. As far as turning on and off this functionality, I believe it's turned on by default. And if you want to turn it off, there's a config setting that you can use. You can also configure it in a way that videos are only recorded for the failed tests, for example, and then if a test has passed, don't record a video. Basically, you're saying it's clear. We don't need to record a video. If you want to save a little bit on that execution time. And then, if you are utilizing the Cypress's test replay feature, you basically don't even need to record separate videos and screenshot, because I think if that feature is enabled for you, it automatically records everything. So you don't need an additional video and screenshot recording to be turned on.
That makes sense. All right. And you also talked about, how you start your data-driven testing by using API to leverage that sort of data, right? And how do you predict API testing would evolve? What are some best practices to keep in mind? Just let's be more specific about API, because everyone's relying on them, right? So how to go about integrating Cypress and other tools for API testing?
Great question. As far as the trends, I would say that API testing is evolving toward greater integration with CI/CD pipelines, improved contract testing, and AI-driven test generation, right? We have to talk about AI, because what kind of webinar it is if we don't talk about AI, right?
Right. AI has been the buzzword for quite some time, and we're seeing a lot of action happening recently, of course. So definitely.
So as far as the AI-powered API test generation, I believe that right now the trend is for AI-driven tools to analyze API schemas and generate intelligent test cases. I think like a year ago, maybe even more than that, maybe 2 years ago already, I did when ChatGPT was just exploding for the first time. I remember I was doing a webinar for Apple Tools, and I was actually using ChatGPT and feeding it some API schemas for it to generate Cypress tests, Cypress API tests, and it did a pretty good job. At that time, the main concern was, main question from the audience was, but what about the, privacy and security concerns?
Yes.
Something that we already talked about. And I think, now with more and more models coming out, and now the models that you can install on your machine and have them like kind of closed out from the external world. And then also more and more companies use these models to generate their own tools, like internal tools. At that was basically my answer back then, is that yes, right now it is a concern, but I'm sure a couple of years or maybe even a year down the road, every company will have their proprietary LLM model that they can use without concerns about security and privacy.
Keeping
So
everything within their own firewall and just making sure it stays there. Right.
exactly, yeah. So that's one of the trends I'm sure we will see more and more. Automatically generating tests based on the API schemas, and then apart from AI part side of it, then contract testing is going to improve and become more and more important. So verifying that API interactions between services to ensure stability in microservices architectures. And then another trend is performance and load testing integration. So combining functional APIs tests with performance testing tools like Artillery, 𝐀𝐧𝐧𝐚, and so on. As far as Cypress and API testing integration, so Cypress supports API testing with 𝐸_request command, 𝐸_request, 𝐸_intercept. So that allows testers to intercept API calls and perform assertions on API responses. It also integrates with tools like Postman via Newman and Supertest for more comprehensive API testing and some other tools as well. And you can also use Cypress in combination with database assertions to validate backend changes. So I think that as API for development grows, tools like Cypress can continue to play an important role in ensuring seamless backend and front-end integration, and kind of provide a good combination of using the same tool for both your end-to-end testing, UI testing, as well as doing some API validations. So basically you can sprinkle in API validations and use the same tool for all of those types of testing.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And, there's nobody better to answer this question really, because you are a Cypress ambassador. But every time people are trying to switch from manual to automation, they always have this question in their mind, whether this framework is a long-term solution or whether it's just a precursor for more advanced tools in the hand. So what are your takes on that when it comes to Cypress? Do you see any trends shaping up in the future of automation with so much happening around AI?
Right, right. That is a great question, and I think that question is on our mind a lot as test automation professionals. What does the future hold? And before I dive into specifics of Cypress, I'd like to preface it by saying that I think one of the most important qualities for any software testing professional and for any IT professional these days is always learning, staying curious, and learning new tools. I think it's important to not get married to just one tool and hope that it will never go away. But instead, try to expand your skill set, add more tools to your toolbox, and always be ready for new changes and some new tools coming on the horizon. So with that being said, I think Cypress is a powerful and evolving tool. But like with any test automation framework, its long-term viability depends on project needs and emerging trends. In short to mid-term, Cypress is an excellent choice for modern web applications due to its ease of use, rich debugging capabilities that we have already discussed, and growing ecosystem. For long term, the future of test automation is likely to involve AI-powered test generation, as we've already discussed, potentially self-healing tests, and broader cross-platform support. Cypress is evolving with these trends, and as long as it continues adapting, it will remain a strong contender in the automation space. So, for example, Cypress already has that recording or Cypress Studio feature where you can basically turn it on and click around on your page, and Cypress will record your interactions and will spit out a script for you. It might not be perfect, but there's more and more of those low code, no code features that I see being added. And Cypress is working on adding more and more features like that and evolving with the current trends to make it more accessible to everyone and make sure that we can integrate it earlier in the development lifecycle by creating tests faster and making it easy for everyone.
Yeah, and I think Cypress is an active open source framework out there, right? It is actively fixing things, upgrading things that it already has. So when you think about opting for a particular framework and thinking whether this is going to stay with me for long, I think you can definitely go and have a look at the version history, see how frequently they push things, what they're fixing, and get an idea about your project needs as to whether they fit or, with your questions in mind regarding your projects. And you also talked about Cypress Studio, which is intriguing because when people try to transition from manual to automation, there's always that learning curve that comes in play, right? So there's everybody feels like, how do I get started, and is this really worth the time, or I could be doing something else? And that's where the power of Cypress Studio comes in, right? But there are frameworks, and of course, like if I really need Cypress to be more flexible, I have to get down and get my hands dirty with the code, right? So how can frameworks like Cypress evolve to be more accessible to, say, non-technical users, to democratize test automation in the coming years?
That's a great question. I do see the test automation frameworks increasingly focusing on accessibility for non-technical users or people who are not very well versed in coding. So tools including like Cypress and also Apply tools, which is a visual testing tool, they keep adding more and more low code, no code features to help non-coders record test steps. And I think expanding this with AI-assisted test generation could make automation even easier. And I see it being done a lot for a lot of tools. Another thing is that could help every team member that's sometimes not even like a technical team member to use tools like that is simplifying test execution in cloud environments. So without requiring deep DevOps knowledge, so setting up easier, better integrations with CI/CD tools. Then another thing that's trending is natural language test scripting. And again, I feel like some variations of this have been around for a long time. It just keeps evolving and making things even faster and easier with AI. But basically, using just the natural language to provide the test scenario to the tool, and then the tool will create a test script for you. And then, of course, dashboards, reporting, and analytics. If we can provide dashboards and AI-driven insights for non-technical stakeholders, that will definitely make it easier for everyone to process and understand the test results, the success of the QA efforts, and in general where we are with the quality in our organization. Because sometimes it's hard to share those test results without, creating some complex dashboards or integrations. So if there's something that can automatically create a nice user-friendly dashboard that shares all of the insights into the test results and trends, that will be great for sharing with stakeholders and ensuring everybody is aware of the state of quality.
Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. And I guess those are all the questions we had for this session. And Well, this turned out to be an extremely insight-packed session, I have to say. A lot of best practices to note down and take back with us. Thanks a lot, Anna, for sharing your expertise. I'm sure everyone in the audience has a clear roadmap about how they can go about implementing Cypress and transitioning from manual to automation, increasing their efficiency, right? And to our audience, thank you so much for being part of this session. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes in the Lambda Test XP series, where we bring you latest trends, strategies in the world of testing and QA. And thanks again, Anna, for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It was fun talking to you. And I'm looking forward to more Lambda test events like this.
Looking forward to hosting you more and more, and I'm sure our audience would be leaning on that as well. So until next time, keep learning, everyone. Happy testing.